everyone, I'm the Tax Pro, and today I'm going to show you how to create a nice looking invoice in QuickBooks Online. So one of the nice things about QuickBooks Online is you can really brand all of your stuff, especially your invoices. It gives you a little bit more of a professional look when you have branded invoices going out to customers. So I'm going to show you the different options that you can use in order to customize your invoices. So here we are on the home page of our fake company, ABC Creative. We are going to go up to the gear icon in the upper right-hand corner, and we are going to go to Custom Form Styles. Now, in Custom Form Styles, we can go ahead and we can create a new style. So you'll see that when we go up here to the drop-down menu for New Style, we have the option for Invoice, Estimate, and Sales Receipt. We're going to go ahead and do a custom invoice. Now, this is where we can put the name of our template. So custom invoice is what I'm going to name it. So we can go to design, content, and emails. Now we can dive in with a template. So these are kind of the options that we get to look at. We can dive in with a template, add a logo, put a different color on there, pick a separate font, and then we can also test it via print. And then when it comes to the content, we can go in and modify the content of the actual invoice, and we can modify the email. So let's start with design. So we have a couple of different options as far as templates that we can utilize in our invoices. So this is the Airy New. You'll see we have Airy Classic. It just looks just a little bit different. This is our modern, fresh, bold, and friendly. So you get a couple different options here. I'm going to stick with the Airy New. And then you can add a logo here. So with this, you would just click on this, upload your logo, and your logo can live right here. I'm going to pause this while I upload a logo. That way you don't see all the files on my computer. Give me just a moment. Okay, so you'll see that I put our logo here, and the logo doesn't have like a clear background for some reason. That's okay. You can play around and make sure that you get your logo exactly the way that you want it. And then we can go in and you can change the different color features. So this color right here is going to sit on this line area on this particular template, but depending on what template you have, this color might be repeated in different areas. We could even leave it like that. And then you can select the type of font that you want to utilize. So they have 4 different options. You can pick which one makes the most sense for your particular business. And then you can have a larger point font if need be. And then you can preview your PDF. So we can preview our invoice right here. So this is what our invoice would look like. I'm not necessarily in love with it. I don't like the bold, but we could modify it from there, right? So there's lots of different options you can play around with. And then we can come in and we can modify the content. So there's a couple of different areas here. So we have this first, we have the header, we have the actual table, and then we have our footer, okay? So in the header, we can select what options we want to leave here. So we can keep the business name there. I would recommend having your business name. We can choose to have a phone number. If we want customers to be able to reach us via phone, we can add or subtract an email. You can put an address and a website up there. When it comes to form, it will have the form name, which is invoice. We can remove this and it'll just have the actual invoice number. Or we could have, sale number, something along those lines. Invoice normally makes the most sense if you're gonna have something there, but it is customizable. We could have form numbers here. Oops. So if you uncheck this, you'll notice that the invoice number is gone. So if you don't want the clients to be seeing the invoice number, you can remove that from there. And we can use custom transaction numbers. So this is going to allow us to edit some of those numbers directly when we generate that invoice. Sometimes, like some accounting systems don't allow you to edit, for example, the invoice number. It's just a sequential number. QuickBooks Online, we can ask it to allow us to change those numbers, which sometimes can be beneficial. And then when we come here, we have, what are we displaying? So the billing address is not optional. Shipping, so we can put shipping information here. So this is going to say, what is the ship date? What did it ship? Like what method? And what is the tracking number? If we're not actually shipping something, we shouldn't add that. The terms are on here. Maybe we don't want the terms to be on there. Maybe there is no due date because maybe this is, an invoice and maybe we already have an existing agreement with that customer that we are going to bill them on, the 15th of the following month or something along those lines. We don't necessarily have to put terms and due dates on there, but you can keep those. Now, you can also add custom fields. I'm not going to go too far into this, but this, if you click on here, it brings you to a custom field section. Okay, and this will allow you to add custom fields that you can then put in the header or the body or the footer of your invoice. So I am going to go ahead and see if I can click back and go back to our invoice template. So we're adjusting the content. So that's the options for the header. Now when it comes to the body is going to be what they're calling the table. So this is going to kind of break down our invoice for our customer. We are going to have, options here on what we include and what we don't include. This is kind of the standard way that the invoice is set up to look. So we're going to have the date. We are going to have the activity or the item name. We're going to have the description of the particular item or service. We're going to have the quantity, the rate. So this is essentially the price per quantity, right? And then the total amount. We can modify what's in here. So we can remove the dates. Maybe we don't need dates on there. We have an invoice date. Maybe that's all that we need. Maybe we don't want like actual dates on there. Maybe we don't necessarily want to have products or services on here. Maybe we want to exclude a description. Maybe it's a pretty simple explanation when it comes to the item name. You don't necessarily have to have the quantity. You don't have to have the rate either. So you can remove any of those. And then I would always leave the amount there just because it creates like an itemized detail for the customer, unless you're in some sort of industry where you're doing like some sort of a package deal, and then you just have the total at the bottom. SKU, this is a identifying number that is attached to particular product numbers. This is kind of a unique identifier for that particular product. So for example, if you have a t-shirt in blue that says, something on it, that's going to have a different SKU than your green t-shirt that says something else. So it is an identifier number that it makes it easier to assign a different description or a different identifier to a product rather than just like an item name. So you can have all sorts of different options here. And then you can have some different activity options. So this is going to go into like you can group items by particular days, weeks, months, or types. For example, if we are sending an invoice and maybe we went and we provided services to this client over the course of a couple of days, and we want them to be able to see, this particular item or this particular service was provided on this day, and we want them to see all the activity for that particular day grouped together, we could have a setting where we are asking QuickBooks to group everything by day. And we could also ask QuickBooks to subtotal that group. So we could say, okay, on Wednesday, your total charges were $1,750. And on Thursday, your total charges were $2,000. Friday, your total charges were $500. Okay, so we can group and subtotal, which allows the client to have kind of a clearer understanding of what actually happened. I recommend that if you are providing a service over the course of multiple days to a client, and it kind of allows them to see the progression and when they were charged certain things. So when they incurred certain fees, like what days. So that's nice. You can group the activity that way. You can collapse the activity rows. So you can combine rows that have the same rate and description to make it a shorter invoice. You can show progress on line items. So this allows you to go in and essentially, you're going to show them what percentage of that particular line item has been completed. So we may say, okay, you're going to pay us for 50% of this particular item or this particular service. So you can do that. That's going to be applicable if you are billing before a item, like a full item has been delivered, or if you're billing, like you like to bill in pieces essentially of that item, or if you're billing based on like the progress that you're making in a service or something along those lines. Great example would be construction. So you might bill, we went ahead and we have completed this portion of the project. We are owed this amount. Once we get this amount, we then move on to phase 2, where, maybe we start the framing or something along those lines. Once the framing is done, we send another bill, and then we move on to wiring or something. So that is how progress, like showing progress on those line items works. You could have, 50% done of this particular step. You can show a markup on billable expenses. So this doesn't change this right here. What this is, I don't necessarily recommend this. So what this is going to do is this is going to show the amount that you have marked up a particular item from your cost. You can show billable time. So this would be applicable like if you were providing a service to the customer. So let's say that you have, like for example, my accounting firm. We don't necessarily bill by time, but a lot of accounting firms do, and I think a lot of people are familiar with that. So I could say, my rate is $300 an hour. I have billed for 1.5 hours. We could reflect that on the particular invoice. You could see I billed for 1.5 hours. That translates to $450. You can also choose to include the employee name at that point in time as well. So maybe I'm billing at $300. Maybe my assistant is billing at $150. And so you can see who is essentially whose time is being billed out and the amount of hours that you're billing for that particular individual. You don't have to use any of these items. So that's the option for the table. This is really going to be set up based on your business. So really think first before you go in to kind of adjust this. Really think how you want your billing to be presented to your customer and also what's standard in your industry, right? So it's very, very flexible. You can do a lot of different things here. You just want to make sure that it's standard in your industry and that it's going to make sense to your customer. Because what makes sense in one industry is not going to make sense in another. With the footer, there's a couple of different things that you can put down here. So you can put the discount rate. I always like to show discounts when I'm showing discounts. I think that it looks nice to itemize that out for the customer. I think that they tend to appreciate it more when the discount is explicitly stated. You can have an area where there's a deposit. So if the client has made a deposit, you want to reflect that deposit, and it's going to reduce the amount that they owe. You can also put an estimate summary in here. So this could pull in an estimate that the invoice was created from, and then you can see how it's deviated essentially from that estimate. This might be a good idea if you tend to overestimate things. You can also remove all these items and just have a very simple footer. So you can put a message to customers on the invoices, And this will essentially sit in the footer. So you could put thank you for your business. And this is just essentially a separate note on your invoice. This is going to live on all sales forms except for estimates. So this will also be on sales receipts. You know, this is definitely optional. I think it's kind of dependent on your industry. And then you can change the size of that. You can also add footer text. So what this means is this text is going to sit in the footer, and this might be something along the lines of, you know, please see our refund policy, or something along those lines. This you can change the size of, and then you can move it to where it's set in a different area. I think it looks nice centered. Then you can preview the PDF to make sure that this is what you want it to look like. So this is what our invoice looks like right now. And then depending on, you know, what you change in here, it could look a lot different. So you could have, you know, all of these options checked. So you could have, you know, all sorts of stuff on here, and it's definitely going to change the way that your invoice looks. So just make sure that you preview that PDF so that you know what it looks like. Now let's talk about emails. So once we've designed the actual invoice, so we know what we want it to look like, and then we have changed the content of the actual invoice, so it's telling the customer what we want it to say. It's presented in the way that we want it. Now we can change the email, because QuickBooks allows you to send out the invoice as an actual email to the customer, which is really nice. So you can send that email, and we can also modify the email, right? So this is going to be how your invoice appears in emails. So you get a couple options here. You can provide the full details, where you're literally going to have, essentially, your invoice is going to live in this email. Do you see all these options here where we have the percentages, we have the terms, all that good stuff? Or we can summarize that particular invoice. I prefer the summarized version because I think it's just neater. It also prevents, like, if somebody has their email pulled up or something along those lines, and it has the full details in it, maybe they didn't want somebody to see that full details of that email or of that invoice. It protects it that way. I also like to attach a PDF to the particular email, and then they can download that email or that invoice for their records. You can choose not to attach the PDF. I like to. Then we're going to have your standard email for your invoice. So this is going to be the email that's going to go out to that particular customer when you email the invoice. You can choose to use a greeting. You don't have to use a greeting. So you'll see here, if we use the greeting, that's going to be dear customer full name. We could change it to, you know, just first name. We could change it to company name or display name. So pay attention to how you enter customers within QuickBooks, because you might have like a particular contact at a company. Maybe you want to address that email to certain contacts sometimes. Then maybe sometimes you want to address it to the company. An easy way to do that would be to put the name that you want to appear on communication in the display name column. You can have dear, you can have to, or you can just have blank and it'll just put the customer's name. Here is the message that will be sent by default. Now, when you send out invoices, you can always adjust it. So you can always adjust this messaging. This is just the default, what's going to pop up. So I like to make this what we're going to use most often, but you're not stuck with this. You can always modify later. So this is the invoice, or the email for the invoice. Now we can also send a reminder email. So this is, you know, we haven't seen payment for your invoice, and you can modify the email for the reminders as well in here, okay? So this is a great way to have a personalized touch in your QuickBooks. It allows you to create invoices that the customers are going to appreciate. I know that it matters more in certain industries than others, but I think it's always nice to at least have your logo on there and make sure that your messaging is where you want it to be. And the format of the invoice is the way that you want it to be for your business, because you want to make sure that the invoice is providing the customer with the information that they need. So I know that was a long video. Thanks for sticking with me. That's how you edit invoices in the format in QuickBooks Online. I hope this was helpful. If so, please consider liking and subscribing, and I will see you guys next time.